Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video, I want to show you how to change brake pads on this 2008 Chevy Silverado. Now what I have found out when I went to the parts store is they say it could either have vacuum brakes or hydro boost. So make note of that whenever you're going to do yours, whether it has those two choices, because they are different. So I'm just going to do the front brake pads on this. I'm not changing rotors, but I'm going to go through the steps as to how to make this happen. Let's take a look. Alright, so as I said, this is a 2008 Chevy Silverado 1500 V6 automatic. Now, if you're curious, you want to know, this is a vacuum brake setup. It has a canister behind the master cylinder and a hose connected that draws vacuum onto that. So if yours has hydro boost, it looks nothing like this. Just to let you know. So as you can see, I already have it jacked up, and I have a jack stand underneath the frame just in case. So I'm going to take this wheel off, and that's going to require either a 22 millimeter or a 7/8 inch socket. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch impact to pull that off. To pull the caliper, 19 millimeter wrench. I use a mallet to break the bolts loose. I do not beat on these things with my hands. I also have a caliper compressor. These are pretty cheap. You can pick them up at any parts store. You can also use big C-clamp vice grips or just a regular C-clamp with a twist on it. I also have a screwdriver just to help me pry on it a little bit, and a set of brake pads. Now I've already done the driver's side, so this is a set that'll go on the passenger side, and I'll show you the difference in just a minute. So as I said, 19 millimeter wrench. I'm going to put that on, use a mallet, break that loose. Do the same thing on the bottom bolt. Break that one loose. Remove the bolts. Now what I found on the other side is whoever worked on this before had put some glue basically on the back side of the pads, so I was not able to separate them very easily. What I ended up doing was using a screwdriver and twisting a little bit. You can probably maybe hear the sound of the glue breaking loose. I'm just being gentle, prying back on that upper piston. I did the same thing on the lower one. Again, on the other side, you can hear the glue. I don't put glue on the brake pads, but this can cause a problem whenever you're trying to take it apart. With that loose, pull the caliper. I rotate it up, put it on top of the spindle, or the rotor assembly, however you want to label it. Okay, so the difference between the inner pad and the outer pad is the scraper. So when you pull off the outer pad, you can see how much wear and tear is on this thing. There is no little scraper. That goes on the inside. So if I show you the new pad for the outside, it's exactly the same shape as this one, and everything looks the same, you know, doesn't have the scraper or anything on it. So whenever you're doing these, also a lot of these kits now come with the little stainless carriers or the guides. It's up to you if you want to change those. I typically leave these in. The factory ones are good, and I've had trouble putting in the aftermarket ones. A little more difficult to get into the channels. So now that I have the outer pad off, and I'll point out too, I've already checked this rotor. There's no grooves or anything in it, so I'm not changing that. So I'll take this pad, basically just push it right back into place. The inner pad, it has the scraper on it down there at the bottom. So if you show you the new inner pad, it also has a scraper down on the bottom. Now the only difference between these is there's a hole in this new one versus the scraper's a little offset. Same function, doesn't change how it works, but just to let you know, they make these the same for either side. So the driver's side, if you were to turn this over, you would put the scraper on the bottom. So they are different. So we'll slip this back in. And that really takes care of just the pads themselves. Now let's take care of the caliper. Okay, for the caliper, you can probably see here, this is some of that glue they put on there. It's up to you if you want to use that. I don't see any real advantage to gluing the pads to the caliper. To me, it just means something else has to be cleaned off later. And these modern ones, they don't chatter around like old cars used to do. So what I want to do is put this pad up in place, and I'm going to take the compression tool. Again, you could use a variety of things. This thing is just pretty convenient. Put this in between, and all I do is tighten this up slowly, and it'll compress the two pistons, squeeze them together, and what it does is it actually pushes the fluid out of the pistons back up to the master cylinder. There are other ways to do this, at least one other way. What you can do, if you wanted to, is there's a bleeder on the back side of this. They call it the bleeder right here. It's underneath this little rubber boot. I've known people to do this. I personally don't do this, but they'll put a rubber hose on here, crack this open, and what that'll do is allow fluid to come out of the caliper. And essentially what you're doing is you're pumping out fluid that you'll replace later in the master cylinder. The idea is you don't have used fluid anymore. It's going to be clean as it comes back into the caliper. I don't do that, but I'm just letting you know it is an option. And I'll show you what I do instead. So I'm going to compress this, and I'll continue to slowly push this in. I'll switch this between the two, since there's two pistons, and kind of work them both in. And I'm not in a big hurry. But let me show you what I'm going to do on the upper side where the master cylinder is. Alright, so up here at the master cylinder, you can see there's the fluid level currently. What happens when your pads get thin, this fluid level drops. And what a lot of people or shops will do is they will add fluid to this. That's really not the way how it's supposed to work, but they do it. The problem is when you go to put new pads on, and if you're doing it like I am and pushing fluid back up, it has to go somewhere. And generally that comes out the top of the cap right here. So what I do, if I need to remove fluid, is I'll take the cap off, and I have this little syringe. I think you can get these at any kind of like pharmacy, very generic, and all I do is stick it down in the fluid, draw it up, and then I put it into a separate bottle. And I keep doing that until I have enough removed that I'm satisfied. I usually save the last little bit out of this and leave it hang in my bottle. And the idea is, once I get the pads done and everything in place, when I push on the brake pedal, it's going to try to push fluid back into the caliper. So it's going to take a little bit of fluid out of this, not much. And if I need to, I can backfill with the syringe to top that off where it needs to be. Let me point out one more thing. While you're doing this, check these guides right here. They should slide in and out pretty easily. They are greased, and if they move really freely, you honestly don't have to do much with them. If they don't, pull them all the way out, clean them up, put some grease on them, and put them back in, and make sure the little rubber boots are back in place. But these, they're rebounding nicely on their own. I'm not going to worry about it. So I have the caliper compressed, I have the pistons compressed. I'm going to rotate this back around, same motion that I used before, because you don't want to twist the hose that connects to the caliper. You want to keep it in a nice straight line. If you put a twist on it, you're going to have problems. So take the bolts, line them back up. Now I don't know the torque specs on these. If you want to know, you can look them up online. Honestly, you're probably better off knowing on your own. So I'm going to take this hammer, mallet, put some torque on them. I'm not trying to bust them off, just trying to make sure they're tight. And that's really it. Make sure your bolts are tight. Make sure the rotor rotates freely. What I normally do at this point is I go back in the vehicle, I pump the brakes a couple times, and that'll again push some fluid back into here, and I can check the level in the master cylinder. If all is good, you're good to go. Get the wheel back on, torque them, you know, look up the torque specs, get the wheel back on, the hubcap, clean everything up, and you're good to go. Alright, that'll be the end of this video. I hope you found some useful information for your project. Remember, if you're interested and you're concerned, look up the torque specs yourself. That way you are confident with the knowledge that you're getting. You know, this isn't that complicated. This is a fairly simple brake job, and you can do it yourself. Save yourself some money. You don't have to go to a shop. Buy the parts yourself, get a few hand tools, and you can take care of it and save yourself some big bucks down the road. Now, I do have other videos on YouTube dealing with all kinds of maintenance stuff. Most of my stuff on these kind of vehicles is brake jobs, but I have done other things like that, so there are other videos out there that cover this subject matter. I also plan to do some maintenance videos on a 2006 Mazda 3. I have 2 check engine lights that I need to clear. I think I have resolved one of those, and I have another one that I need to do some more work to, so I'm going to be sharing something with that very soon. Also, I have a 2013 Honda Odyssey that belongs to my wife. I'm going to replace the serpentine belt and replace the front rotors and pads on that vehicle because it has a vibration when you hit the brakes, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So other than that, check out my channel. I've got plenty of restoration videos on old classic cars, mainly Mustangs, and there's a lot to show you or a lot to see on the channel. But at this point, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. By all means, hit that like button, share my videos, help this channel grow, but that'll be it. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.